You've already pressed? Okay. Sound check. Aloha, 1, 2, 3. Sound check. Aloha, 1, 2, 3. Aloha, 1, 2, 3. Check. Checking for the folks on Zoom to make sure you can hear us okay. Okay. Aloha and good afternoon. Welcome, welcome. Not a surprise that these two fine gentlemen got us busting at the seams today. And that's an excellent, excellent tribute to what we're going to enjoy today. Welcome again. My name is Thomas Dalbert. I'm Executive Director of the Friends of Kauai Wildlife Refuges. And you're here for our Princeville Moʻolelo series. Just a little orientation. Folks in the room, we are recording on Zoom, so please just try to be mindful of your background noise. Folks on Zoom, if you have a question, Patty is administering the Zoom room, so feel free to put any questions or comments in there and she'll bring them into the room for us. But we are in for a treat. So just a quick little orientation. Folks, there are a couple of chairs down in front. You're here for the Princeville Moʻolelo series, which is a collaboration. Oops, I do this every time. I'm so sorry. Pardon me. It was working. Oh, it's that. We've only been doing this a couple of years. There's one button I have to push. That's my whole job. Okay. All good. All good now. Now I can go home. Don't give me the button. No. This space and this series is a collaboration between the Friends of Kauai Wildlife Refuges and the Princeville Hanalei Community Association. So we're very grateful for the space and for the warm welcome here. And so we host this series just sharing stories of wildlife conservation and cultural practitioners, and today some incredible history. And folks coming in, there's a couple of seats over here on the other side. I see so many new faces, so it's a really great opportunity for me just to give a little quick blurb about what we do as the Friends Group supporting our refuge. For those of us that know us well, you could probably get up here and say this because you've heard me say it before. But we, Friends of Kauai Wildlife Refuges has been around since 1983. So we're one of the oldest Friends groups in the entire service, helping to support our island's 3 national wildlife refuges, which of course are Kīlauea National Wildlife Refuge, which is a refuge for endangered seabirds, and then our oldest refuges of Hanalei and Huleia, which help support endangered wetland bird populations. So we have been around for a long, long time, basically serving as a conduit for the generosity of our community to come and help support the mission of these 3 beautiful places that help support our wildlife. So we help support U.S. Fish and Wildlife programs, protecting our birds, helping to maintain these important spaces and wetland and seabird habitats. We have a future wildlife conservationist back there. I'm certain of it. A couple of programs that I'm really proud of, just a quick plug of all of the birds that are injured or sick from one of our 3 refuges and gets transferred over into the care of our incredible partner, Save Our Shearwaters. The cost of that work is one of the things that we underwrite as a Friends group, to the tune of over $30,000 a year. And every year when that goes up, meeting the need of more and more wildlife that need us, we've been able to do that thanks to the love and generosity of our community. So we're super proud of that. And additionally, this year, we are estimated to give $25,000 away in scholarships for young people who are studying in conservation-based careers. So we are helping support the future of wildlife conservation. Again, thanks in part to all of you. Yes, thank you so much. Couple quick ways that you can help us. You can visit us out at Kīlauea Point, and shop our nature store. All the proceeds of that shop go into the mission of our 3 refuges. And we have incredible folks out there that'll be happy to talk a story about our mission. Tina's here today. She's one of our amazing associates there. Bravo, Tina, for your work there. Volunteering, donating, staying in touch. We have an email newsletter that we send out once a month. If you're not receiving it, I would welcome you to sign up on the sheet behind on the table back here and be able to stay in touch with us and hear more about the work we're doing through our Moʻolelo series. And follow us on social media, where you'll get incredible views of wildlife you may not be able to get that up close and personal with. But because I'm volunteering out in the wetlands and up with our Moʻolelo population, you get to see some really great images that we're happy to share with you. So hopefully you'll follow us on social media as well. So to the important stuff of what here, oh, one more quick thing. As I said, this is a part of an ongoing series. It's a monthly series. And the next one will be on June 18th, featuring our friends at KISS. Kim Rogers is going to speak about helping to save and support our ohia population. And Halen Chalk is going to talk about little fire ants and a new emerging threat of the coconut rhinoceros beetle. So some really great information for us all to learn about how to help keep our ecosystems safe and healthy. June 18th, join us right back here in this room. So today we have with us two incredibly generous, warm, amazing, beloved members of our community who are just full of history, having grown up in this community and being a part of preserving it and protecting it. And thankfully, just the gatherers of these stories and the generosity of their spirit of giving back and sharing it today. And my heart is full. I'm so excited to hear from both of you and appreciate it so much. Mr. Gary Smith, Mr. Gary Pacheco, warm welcome to both of you.
Aloha kako. And as you will see through this presentation, that Gary and we kind of make it up as we go along. But I guess this is the first of the Gary Banana Fanaful Ferry Kīlauea show.
Thank you, sir.
So anyway, this is Charles Titcomb. I'm going to go really quickly because I thought he would be late, so I was going to start the history of Kīlauea earlier than I wanted to. Just to say that Charles Titcomb came to Kīlauea in 1863. He arrived in Hawaii in about 1832 in Koloa, and he eventually came to Hanalei. And by 1850, he was leasing 700 acres in Hanalei Valley from Kamehameha III. He then sold his 700 acres in Kalihiwai Valley for $29,000 to Robert Wiley, who owned Princeville. And from there, he moved to Kīlauea and he bought 3,000 acres for $2,600 and started a farming operation in Kīlauea. As you'll see, most of the newcomers that came to Kīlauea, the Howleys who came into Kīlauea, by the time they came into this vicinity, and I'm going to say, Kīlauea back in the old times had a moving definition. Kīlauea is ahupua'a. It's a piece of land, and it's part of the Ko'olau district of 11 other ahupua'as in the Ko'olau district, extending from Kīlauea already to Anahola. And we have Miss Cyrilla Cole over here representing Anahola. She's been there for ages. When I was a kid, she was there. And from Kīlauea, we have Francisco Peru and Judy Raposo from Kīlauea Sugar Company. Their parents work for Kīlauea Sugar Company. Digressing already, but that's my style. But anyway, so eventually he married this woman here, Kanikele Kamalinui, and she is from Wainiha, and he had 9 children. One of her children, eventually, I jumped ahead of myself here. Let me go forward a bit. One of her children married this man, Christian Bertelman, who eventually owned Pila'a, Kahili, and Waiakalua. Those ahupua'as. So his father and Christian Bertelman arrived in Hawaii at a little after about 1837 or so in Koloa as well. And eventually, because they met the famous Dr. Smith, no relation to me, who was the only doctor physician on the island. Dr. Smith bought some land called the Moloa Hui lands up in Ka'apuna Hui lands up above Moloa. As you go up to Moloa Hill, up in the Mauka areas. That was the lands that he bought. Eventually, and Charles Tickham started a sugar company, which he sold to Adams and Ross in 1870. Then 1877. Then in 1880, this fellow here, Robert McPhee Jr., comes because his father is a sugar refiner and a businessman, merchant in Great Britain, lots of money, and they buy Kīlauea. And he's the one that starts the railway system. And this is Robert McPhee, his wife, and his wife here with a tunnel. But I think this tunnel is an irrigation tunnel that they're digging, not a railway tunnel. But they dig it with sending a rail cart in and taking the soil out. So, and I'm going to move as fast as I can. And this is eventually this fellow, Christian Berleman, is the road supervisor for Kīlauea and for the Hanalei district. And he builds the first wharf. This is Kahili Landing. This is the landing warehouse. And this would be the beach right here, which is the same, and the river mouth would be here. As you can see, there's no foliage. There's very little, only just grasses that are growing there. So everything else is introduced. And so this lighter comes off a big ship that's anchored out at sea. And this is the wharf that he builds at Kahili. So the lighter, the lighter prior to, you can see it here, it's coming in this way to this landing. And you see the lumber that they're floating in. And these pictures are courtesy of Bishop Museum. The other thing that gives Kīlauea its great distinction are all the beautiful stone structures that are left as a legacy for the community. The stone structures are the brainstorm of this fellow, L. David Larson. He comes to Kīlauea in 1917 and is made the manager of Kīlauea Sugar Company, Kīlauea Sugar Plantation Company. And he has a degree, unlike most of the managers. He comes from the Great Lakes states, I think Wisconsin or something. He's of Swedish descent, born in Sweden, came with his parents to the Great Lakes states, and he has a degree in plant pathology, which is rare for a plantation manager. So he's a very intelligent guy. And so he builds this structure in 1926. It's 6,000 square feet, all the bottom. It's a manager's house, all rock, like all the rock work in Kīlauea town today. We have like probably around 17 structures that are from the plantation. And there's no community in the state of Hawaii that can match the plantation history through its architecture than Kīlauea today. Now, for our reality, this is what we grew up with. We grew up in the heart of Kīlauea, and this would be a picture looking at it from Kong Long's store. If you're standing at Kong Long's store, like about here, looking there, that's what you saw. Namahana in the background here, and complete with the mud puddles and the gravel. And this was the reality. And so even today, when I walk like this. There's something, stand up, walks like this. Rocks, hila, mud puddles, and everything else that you would get in your way with bare feet. It's a hard habit to break. And this is another view. This view here is right from Kīlauea Road, and this house still exists today. That's the last stone structure on that Kīlauea Road before you get to Oka Street would be right here. Yeah. So that's the reality. And this is where the gymnasium, and this is Ogata store and theater. And this will go back a ways. And this is what the camp looked like. Gary Pacheco's house would be right here. Yeah. Now, I'd be remiss to say that, and that's why Gary Pacheco is a wonderful man to have here, and I won't let him say a word. I promise. But he's a wonderful guy to have because he adds a whole different perspective. Although our perspectives are similar, I grew up in the house that L. David Larson built. He grew up in a house like this. Yeah. And so I can't say, oh, you know, it was so hard on the plantation and we had mud puddle and we had a paved road. There's only 2 paved roads in Kīlauea. One to the lighthouse, the main highway, and the road to the manager's house. So that was my reality. And I'm fortunate, and many of my friends came right from down the street. Some of my friends today would be like Herbie Kawamura lived here. He passed away recently. Dennis Apilado lived here. Nishies lived here. And then over here would be my classmate again, Sandra Nebri, and then James Torrio. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4 classmates live right here on the street. They're all my friends still today. Yeah. And this was their reality, but they never held it against me for being so blessed to have, you know, have what I have, you know, what I was perceived to have at the time. And this is what Kahili looked like when it was a rock quarry. You see the road here. This road was built in the about 1964. So the road that comes to Kahili on the Wailapa side, my father built that road. He built it solely, and this was an environmental nightmare, but they got away with it. It took 50 years for that thing to disappear. Nature can cure itself if you let it. But they did that so that the rocks from the quarry went to, for the paving, the creation of the road that was Bolowa'a bypass on the top. Back in the day, we would go to Kapa'a through the old Ko'olau Road, winding down into Molowa'a Valley, and then come back up. And then in 64, they made that road there, and they cut, you know, the travel time immensely. And this is another view. This is what it looked like back in the 60s. You see all the quarried area here. The landing would have been way out here, the original landing. And you can see the 3 sisters over there. 1, 2, 3. Now, one of the things that, and we're going to start including you, don't worry. Even though I promised I wouldn't let you speak. One of the things that we're fortunate is that many of the Japanese and Filipino functions, they took mass photographs of the whole group. This is Christchurch Parish Hall. This was built as a Buddhist church in 1925. And this is the dedication of the Buddhist church. All Japanese. You can see all Japanese, 1925. And this fellow here, I know him, he's Koichi Moritsugu, and he's one of the few guys I know in this picture. But this is L. David Larson here from the plantation. So this would probably be my segue into understanding. Many people say, oh, you know, how come Kīlauea, you're so tight? It's a tight community, but we're not as tight as we once were. And the glue that held us together was the plantation. And everybody in the community, save for 5 people, worked for the plantation. And so you were talking about maybe 1,200 or so people. Now, this followed up. This is another funeral picture, a modern day funeral picture, which I know many of the people in here, of which, if you see this one guy over here with his glasses over here, that's the handsome Mr. P. Right here. Mitchell Quinones, Kiyoshi Kawamura. This is my father here. This is Ian Bowman, the assistant, the field superintendent. My father was the manager of Kīlauea Sugar Company. Oh, today, there are probably only 10 people still alive that actually work full-time for the plantation. Plantation closed in 1971. And so the last of the workers are in their mid-80s and 90s. And This man here is one of them. Now, there are probably maybe 30 or 40 of us, or maybe less, who work for the plantation during summers, who are still alive. And so we did these kind of jobs. This is called a sabidong job. Spray, a knapsack sprayer. Sabidong means poison in Spanish. And so that's what the Filipinos would call this poison spraying. They're spraying herbicide in the field. Is another spray. I think this is a William Kaili. And this is Saturino Taktai. And he's a seed cutter. And so, what job did you do on the plantation?
I was,
For summers.
for the summer, I used to do push cane. When the irrigation ditch, and what we do is we'd open up the ditch because the cane would cover the ditch and the water wouldn't flow. So we'd have to push it so it'll open up the irrigation. Now, this gentleman was known as the best seed cutter. He always exceeded what he was asked to do. Now, you see the pile on the bottom? That cane that he cut was used to replant. After they harvested the cane, they used this to fill in where the cane wasn't growing. So what happened was they cut it, they bundled it, they cut the tubes from the tires to bundle it up. They cooked it in a hot bath. They had a cementing like a big furrow, and then they take it out in the field and they'd have donkeys distribute it. And what had happened is they'd plant it, and then the ladies, my wife showed me a picture the other night, and she says, "What are the ladies doing? Standing up, holding the hoe?" Well, the ladies, their job was to cover the seeds that was cut and planted so that they get a full row of sugarcane.
Yeah. During the summer, one summer when I was 17 years old, I did this job next to this man and a bunch of other older men. He's probably about 50 at the time. I was 17. It was one of the hardest jobs I ever did in my life, you know. And this guy smiled all the time and just helped you. And he said his knife, "Oh, you borrow my knife," because they had really good knives. So
Very sharp.
steel, and they sharpened them with a stone. And our knife was with a file, one of those German cane knives. And what then I realized through my research is that in the 1930s, this job was done by women, 40-year-old Japanese women who had children who were now going to school, and they were supervised by a Puerto Rican woman who came to Kīlauea in about 1906, and the Japanese women came to Kīlauea between 1886 and 1910 or so. But I'm going to digress here and say one thing, that in Mr. P, we have one of the original immigrant families to come to Kīlauea, and their family came to Kīlauea in 1883 and 1884. Yeah. And the Pachecos, when they came to Kīlauea, there were 5 Pacheco males. I think 3 or 4 of them were married, and then a wife, a fiance came for another Pacheco 2 years later. And so of these 5 Pachecos, I think maybe 2 or 3 were related and the others were unrelated. And at one time, and by 1920, there were 2 Theodore Pachecos in Kīlauea. One was in World War I, and he came home a victim of mustard gas, and it took him 1 year to die, and he's buried. In 1920, he died, and he's buried at the Portuguese cemetery in Kīlauea. So Mr. Pacheco's pedigree far exceeds mine. My pedigree is my great uncle came to Hawaii in 1897 from Demerara, British Guiana. And he went there from Scotland, to work the sugarcane fields in Demerara, which you've ever heard of, Demerara rum. By the time he got there, they had been distilling Demerara rum for 150 years. The Dutch were original ones there. And so eventually he got wind that there was opportunity in Hawaii. And so in 1897, he went to Hakalau Sugar Company on the Big Island and worked there for probably, I would say about 12 years. And then he was appointed the manager of Pa'auhau Sugar Company on nearby. And Pa'auhau would be, if you're familiar with the Big Island, it would be between Waipio Valley and Laupahoehoe. That's where Pa'auhau Sugar Company would be, small sugar company. Now, the rank and file people, union people, had their own. One thing that made the community as solid as it was that the community had various newsletters. And I'm going to digress back here for a second and say the plantations of Hawaii invented the Hawaiian plantation community. So the remnants of what is in Kīlauea today as the former residents of the plantation days, we're products of, I wouldn't say an experiment, but we're products of a designed community that was not designed in a vacuum. It was designed by 1900. There was an association of planters that got together. It was called Hawaii Sugar Planters Association. And all the sugar companies throughout Hawaii, maybe 80 or so, kicked in money to support this association, who did all the research, varietal research, mechanized research, engineers, accounting, and they also had a social branch. And they also had a branch that sought workers from other countries. And so by 1920 or so, HSPA had a branch office in the Philippines, in Manila. And so this is how organized they were. And so each community, the HSPA would send a mandate, and a mandate could be like, it is important for the management to attend the functions of the various ethnic groups in the community. So if there was the blessing of the Buddhist church, the manager would be there among other high supervisors to show respect. If there was a Rizal Day is a big day for the Philippines. It's the liberator of the Philippines, Jose Rizal, and it's in December. So the plantation HSPA sent a mandate out. You must give all the Filipinos, only the Filipinos now, Rizal Day off in December. And so it was a big deal because these guys were working 10-hour days, 6 days a week. And so they also had welfare workers who came in and they taught mothers how to cook with the stoves, child nutrition, and this was paid for by the plantation. They also had camp police who, if you didn't show up to work, they come to your house and say, either get to the hospital or show up to work, or else we're going to dock you. And the other thing is that if you had a good work attendance, you got a bonus at the end of the year. So it was a community that was designed to be cohesive. Now, being cohesive helps when everybody works for the same employer. You wouldn't find this, let's say, at McBride or even in Lihue, where the community was interspersed with businessmen and other concerns. You wouldn't have as great a cohesiveness as you would have had in like Kīlauea Sugar Company, for example, Kohala Sugar Company, Hawaiian Ag Sugar Company, Na'aleo Hutchison Sugar Company, who everybody works for the plantation. And so one of the ways was the union had their little sheet that they sent to their employees. And so this is a picture of a strike. This is my sister, and she's in front of a bamboo hut. In 1969, they had a labor strike. and 1969, record of 1969 strike. And they made this bamboo hut, and because there's all the Filipinos who come from the Philippines and make bamboo huts all the time. And so they had a bamboo hut. And this monkey pod tree would be right at the corner of not Jurassic Park Ranch, but Healy Street that comes out to the highway. And you're looking up to that fancy gate with all the guavas in front. And there's who lives up there? Wells and Ivy, Phil Ivy and Wells live up there, up that road. It would be right on that little knoll above the highway. Now, the plantation also had their own newspaper that they sent to everybody. So it was called the Namahana News in the 1950s. This is from 1954, this edition here. Kīlauea fertilizes 300 acres in 8 hours by air to break record. Safety affects all of us. Kīlauea now has a new truck. 13 employees retired after long service. Sugar output, 510 tons, less than estimated. Commencement is held at Kīlauea School. So this newspaper tied the 3 main entities in town. The plantation, the school run by the state, and the churches. So everybody, all the leaders of the community were on the same page. And so this is how you get cohesiveness. This is why we're so familiar with each other all these years, because everything was a shared reality. Now this is William Mahikoa, and this is Bud Tate. She is the manager's wife in 1950s. William Mahikoa was the editor of Namahana News. Now, William Mahikoa's family comes from Kalihiwai, and he's one of the very few Hawaiians that was working for the plantation at the time. He's related to the Huddies, the Huddies were also working on the plantation. And if you can imagine, when Charles Titcomb and Bertleman came to Kauai in 1830s, there were probably only less than 800 people, all Hawaiians, living from Kīlauea all the way to Anahola. 800. They were decimated. And so when these people arrived, wide open, all this land is vacant, nobody there. Now, then in the 60s, 1961, Tom Takimoto becomes, and this fellow, Bob Maiko, is called the Industrial Relations Superintendent. And so he handles all the employee, what do you call it? HR things. He manages the gym. He creates the programs for the plantation or for a brick record party or something like that. And then in 1961, we get a new HR. Bob Mahikoa retires, and we get this Tom Takimoto. And so in the initial edition, it had no name yet. Yeah. But on the cover, he superimposed, this is Gary Pacheco's father, Freddie Pacheco. So you think Gary Pacheco is humorous. His father was even more humorous. He went to my father one time and he said, Mr. Smith, your wife is Portuguese, yeah? My father said, no, she's not Portuguese. He goes, you sure she's not Portuguese? My father said, no, Freddie, I'm sure she's not Portuguese, but why do you ask? He said, me and my wife, Angeline, right?
Right.
Me and my wife, Angeline, we was talking and we figure she's so nice, she gotta be Portuguese. But that was Freddie. So they superimposed this, and so in the plantation, we had the theater, so everybody went to the theater, and the HSPA also organized or made a contract with Consolidated Theaters and said, we want this movie, we'll pay for it, and it runs the plantation circuit. So all the plantations had their own theater. Some really nice ones. We had a pretty lousy one. But so Freddie had everybody bamboozled where he caught this giant opi, and he was sworn to secrecy for 1 year. So maybe you want to comment about that. No comment. At the end of the year, oh no, believe not the same old OP again. Yep, but believe it or not, it's now 2 years old this month, Kīlauea Life. So anyway, and this is a picture. So it was eventually called Kīlauea Life, which Rick Shaw coined up from a contest from a little, like he was maybe in the 3rd grade, came up with Kīlauea Life, like Life magazine. So they chose Kīlauea Life. And this is Kalihiwai Bridge. Yeah. I'm the first person to cross that bridge on a wheeled, what would you call it? Vehicle, my bicycle. But I had to go around all these things, and I didn't have railings or anything. But we were going to Hanalea on our bikes.
What year?
1963, I think. Yeah, or 64, something like that. This is a picture of Kīlauea Slippery Slides, and we spent many a happy hour at Kīlauea Slippery Slides. This is before they dynamited this out in 1957 to make the slippery slide for the movie South Pacific. And so with that segue, I'll leave the floor to you, Mr. Pacheco, to talk about Kīlauea Falls. And wake up. And get any coffee in the room. Kīlauea Falls and the movie South Pacific.
Well, can I reverse a little bit?
Oh,
Can you reverse to the plantation camp?
oh boy. You were sleeping.
There.
Oh,
Okay, right there.
Oh.
No, the next one.
okay.
Okay. As you can see, the houses were all with tin roof and the road was not paved. So whenever it rained, it would be a mud puddle. And the movie theater is at the end of this road on the right. And what it is,
The old theater.
the old theater, the Japanese had what they call the geta. It was a wooden slipper that was about so high that if you had that and it would be raining, you could go to the movie and go home and your feet wouldn't get dirty because the thing was above the mud. And the plantation, the carpenter shop would make the getas for the people. And you'd have to tell them, you know, I get one size 12 feet or I get one size 4 feet, and they would make it. And that's what we used to go up and down when we went to the movies at night. Now, the other thing on this picture, you see that the telephone pole with the long pipe and the antenna? That was to catch the TV stations from Oahu. And whenever you watch the TV stations from Oahu, you'd have to wear a coat because of all the snow that was on the TV.
Well, actually, it was up on Crater Hill, which we know as Nihoku today. There was a receiving station from Mount Kahili in Kaleo, because the west side got TV reception directly from Honolulu and improved from Mount Kahili because they're facing Oahu. Yeah, over here, there's a dead zone from probably past Anahola all the way to Hyena, no TV. I mean, radio, difficult to catch. And so they put these kind of antennas over there.
So anyway, those were, you know, the houses, and the rent was cheap from the plantation, like $15 a month. And I always say, and my wife is always on my case when I say this, Kīlauea was the first to have pasteurized water. Believe it, Kīlauea had pasteurized water before all this chlorine and all these other things. The reason is, from the mountain, there was a ditch that went through the pasture that the Robinsons had, where the cows and everything else went. and it went into a redwood pipe and then it came to us. So whenever it rained in the mountain, we'd have brown water. So if you want hot cocoa, you just get the dirty water, heat it up, put a little bit of sugar and cream, and you get cocoa. So my wife is always on my case. Don't you say that. I say, yeah, that's the truth. The thing went through the pasture, so we had pasteurized water. So anyway, living in the camp was real a pleasure because everybody was so close to each other. You know, we played marbles and hide and go seek and all of that.
Yeah, we're gonna get more into that.
Okay,
We're moving along. Part of the Kīlauea life, they would feature a Kīlauea homemaker. This is Myra Nichie. She's still alive today. She's in Garden Island Care, that's Garden Care Center. She's 103. Yeah. And so they
was because of the water.
she has a Chinese spare ribs over here. There's a recipe for Chinese spare ribs, war cake, a little plantations, one about the all the Mauka lands and all the valley lands that Kīlauea, by the time Kīlauea, I would say in the 1930s or so, they managed around 12,000 acres of land. Yet they farmed only 4,500 acres of land. The rest of the land they called Opala land, rubbish. These lands today is oxymoron because these are all the lands down at the beach and the little valleys and the beautiful places like Pila'a and where Na'ainakai beach is. That was all Opala land. And all these lands eventually, well, prior to that, the plantation ran cattle. Because simultaneously, the plantation ran a cattle ranch and they ran a sugar operation. And all the cattle were driven down to Kalihiwai Bay and swam out to a ship who picked up each cattle up and put them on the ship and took them to Honolulu, where they cattle in the late 1800s sold for like $5 a head on Kauai, but on Oahu it would get maybe $20 a head, and so that's why they sent it to Honolulu. So anyway, the cattle were the enemy of sugarcane because cattle love sugarcane. Who wouldn't, yeah? So if they got out, broke through the fence, they would go and eat all the cane, and so they'd have to fence it out. But eventually they leased all those lands to Galen Robinson, who ran cattle all on the Mauka lands and all the valley lands to Kahili and all like Lepe'uli and Ko'olau Beach, like what you call Larson's Beach. Larson's Beach was named for that guy, L.D. Larson, because he had a beach house down there. And so, of course, we lived during the time where there was a nuclear threat of nuclear warfare, and you had to dig the fallout shelter and go underneath your desk and all that stuff. So they had a big thing in the paper there. I don't know if people panicked when they saw that bomb go off, but and then we also had a little portion, Kilauea's Young Beauties. So this girl was probably about 17 years old. Priscilla is 17 years old, and so they'd feature all these things. And so they'd come from all the various ethnic groups in the plantation. So everybody knew what everybody was doing. And so in that way, and these are all the kids, we were treated by this fellow, Mori Ho'ikaika, who treated everybody to soda, which was a big treat. There was, I think soda was like soda bottle was 7 ounces. And we used to slug it down like nobody's business, but it was like rare. And so this is me with my stomach over there sucking up my soda with my friend Mark Nakagoshi and a few other guys, a whole bunch of Kīlauea kids. This is the Kīlauea dispensary. And this is every year the plantation IR department would put up the Santa Claus and the reindeer and all that stuff. They would also put like United Way, when they'd have the collection for United Way, they'd have a big feather, and this is how much we collected so far. And the next week they'd come and put another one, and another one. So here's bringing in the school, the Lions Club. Lions Club in a Sight is Beautiful contest. They're still going on then. This is for a record party, of which, interestingly enough, my father was a part of 3 of the plantation records. And the fourth one, the last one, the last one, which was not a record, ranked second behind the highest record, which was 19,000 tons of sugar. And that's harvested from approximately 2,000 and some change in acres of land, of sugar land, because sugar is a 2-year crop. So every 2 years you harvest 2,000 acres. If you have a 4,500 acre plantation, 2,250 acres of land is harvested every year. And so he was part of the 4 highest yields ever recorded on the plantation. Mr. Pacheco, the show is yours.
Well, going back to the young beauties that there. Now, these girls, what they'd have in the gym, they'd have the social box, as they called it. And the girls would cook up a box of food with chicken, rice, and whatever. And a lot of the Filipino men were single. They were horny. So what would happen is one of the girls would bring up her box lunch and they'd bid on the box lunch. And some of the boxes went like for $100.
Yeah, actually it was a cake.
Anyway, what happened was, if they won the box lunch, they could dance with the girl. And they would hug the girl so hard she had a hard time breathing. Anyway, and the Filipino song would last about 10 minutes. And by the time the song was done, the girls would like, please, I need oxygen, because they took all the oxygen from me. But it was a tradition that they'd have this, and the Filipino band would play music for the girls, because they were spending money that, they could go to the prom or whatever they needed the money for.
Mm-hmm.
So it was entertainment for the single man, entertainment for the girls, and they could make some money. So it was a give and take thing that the plantations sponsored things like this, that they could have money making for them.
Very good. He brings up a good point. There were a lot of bachelors in the community. And this was kind of orchestrated by the plantation by design, which I think was rather disingenuous of the plantation to do that. But up until 1910 or so, with the exception of Gilbert Islanders who were brought here in 1881 or so, that were here for 2 years, they came all as single men. Most of the ethnic groups that came brought wives or imported wives with them, and the plantation fully promoted that, because they actually were creating the next generation of workers. So many of the kids born on the plantation became the next generation of workers, and the girls became the next generation of housewives who made the next generation of more workers. It's expensive, because when they brought these people in as families, they have to put them in larger houses. Originally, the Chinese that came in were not given that opportunity, and they were placed in barracks. And later on, the Japanese single men were also placed in barracks. But the Japanese had such a thing as picture brides. So eventually they ordered picture brides to come in for the single men. And so a lot of the picture brides, the guy sends this picture, he takes a picture of his handsome friend, sends that to the girl in Japan, and she goes, oh, nice. She comes to the, she's looking for her husband. As she comes off the ship, she goes, so you don't look like this guy. But anyway, so by 1920, they imported many Filipino, single Filipino men in the hundreds. And because they worked 10-hour days, 6 days a week, they hired a cook, they had tailors who, because you can't cook food after you come out 10-hour days. And the Japanese women were industrious enough that they would go and wash their clothes and make money from them because they didn't have wives or anything. And most of these men remained single. And so I know a slew of Filipino men by first name, even though they were 40 years older than I was. Most of them, all of us knew all these Filipino men by first name. No problem talking to them about whatever, but they had no opportunity to marry. And the plantation said, well, when your time is up, we'll send you back to the Philippines. But a lot of these guys are disconnected to the Philippines by the time the time was up. So I feel in a way it was disingenuous, but there were Filipinos that did marry, and then the product right here is a second generation Filipino woman. Josephine Yadao marries Francisco Peru, and they have Francisco Peru over here. So he comes from the 1920 group of Filipinos that came in, and his grandmother, Francesca Peru, you might remember her. She walked in, and she was in a, when she was about in her late 70s, early 80s. We were used to seeing old Japanese women who had come from Japan as picture brides, who walked around town, and most of them had osteoporosis, and they used to wear these happy coat sweaters with no sleeve and a long drab skirt. They were all mostly widows, and spoke all Japanese, and then they spoke English. Would be like example would be they spoke in a Japanese pidgin. So a good example would be my dad, when he was a young man, went into a plantation, a barber shop, and the Japanese women were barbers, housewives who worked side job as a barber. So when they walked in the door, he realized that the barber and this old Obasan grandma was having trouble with the little grandson because he was resisting a haircut. He was crying and crying. And so when my father walked in, and my father was my height, but he was like 210 pounds. So when he walks into this barber shop, grandma says, Wataru, you no cry. Big boso kam. Big boso. Kuhu with you. Bambay higon paya yo papa. Yo papa no ken hana hana. Bambay no mo cow cow. You going make. So did you understand what I said? So that's how they spoke. You don't, for us, it's a reality that we do not see today. But on the Filipino side, Apo Baket, between grandmother, old grandmother, she had only one eye, so she had a glass eye. So she take out her glass eye and she chased these kids all around the place. They were scared to death of her. And she's a smoker, rope tobacco, and they used to call it Toscani, but it's Tuscany. It's Tuscany rope tobacco. She'd smoke it backwards, and she'd wear this long dress tied up over here with a short sleeve shirt button up, have a bandana on her head, and she'd carry her basket of clothes because she did laundry for the single Filipino men, and she'd be walking with her Toscani backwards in her mouth, and she'd smoke it backwards. And so I asked somebody, why does she smoke it backwards? He said, well, because they believed that the ashes were medicinal. That's why she smoked it backwards. But anyway, you remember her?
Oh, definitely. She was Apo Bucket. Whenever we went to the chicken fight, they called her because she had the Toscani backwards. And then she'd blow the smoke onto the chicken for good luck. And this guy and his brothers would be there front and center with their chickens to go to the chicken fights. And at first, the locals were kind of hesitant because, hey, the manager's kids are here. But we treated them, you know, in our age, we treated them like, hey, so what?
Royalty. Oh, no, sorry.
No, we treated them like anybody else. Not because they were the manager's sons, that they had other privileges. And we had chicken fights. And the reason why we went to chicken fights was there was a prom coming up or a good movie. And you ask your father, hey, can I have $1 to take the girl out? He has a quarter. But hey, what? So a week or so before, we'd go to the chicken fights and we'd fight our chicken. We'd almost always win. And we'd make money so that we could take the girls out.
So the plantation organized volleyball. These are all plantation employees here. And then they had the Miss Filipino candidates. And that's another thing is that in the old gymnasium, which I showed you the picture, every December, they'd have the Jose Rizal Festival. And and prior to that, Portuguese had the Holy Ghost Festival. And that was held at Pentecost Sunday. It's around Easter time. And the Holy Ghost Festival was created in the 1400s or so when there was a cyclone in the Madeira Islands, and all the people were destitute. There was no food, no water, and miraculously on Pentecost Sunday, a ship shows up there with water and supplies. And so this miracle, the Queen of Spain of Portugal declares that this is the Holy Ghost Festival. We'll have it at Pentecost Sunday. And so all the Portuguese, which were predominantly Catholics, we had many Portuguese in the town, and we have a good example of a Judy Raposo over there. Her family also comes to Kīlauea in 1884 or 1883. So her father was the third generation already. And her father was the accountant for the Kīlauea Sugar Company. He worked in the office. He was really smart in the brains. People say, oh, dumb Portuguese or whatever, but not the Raposos. They were Portuguese. They are. Yeah, they are. They still are. Correct, yes. So anyway, one of the leaders in the Portuguese community would be chosen as the Madrone. And Flavia, did they have that festival in Brazil? Holy Ghost Festival? Okay. Anyway, I'm just curious. And he would be the major domo who would organize this thing, and they'd have a dance the night before, and they'd have a food the following day, and then they'd have mass on Sunday. And one of the leaders was also a musician, and he had a band, and they went to the manager's house. This is like in 1912, and serenaded the manager on this Holy Ghost Festival day. And so the Filipinos had their own festival on Jose Rizal Day. And what the Portuguese did the same way is that one year St. Sylvester's Parish held it. The following year, St. Catherine's Parish, St. Teresa's, Immaculate Conception. So they'd move every year. And so the Filipinos would do the same thing with their
Rizal Day.
Rizal Day Festival. And they had all the princesses from the island, from each of the Philippines, Miss Luzon, Miss Pearl of the Orient, Miss Mindanao. And so we in Kīlauea were treated to some of these events when it was held in Kīlauea, and the Filipinos from all around the island would come. All the princesses would be there, and they'd have a band, and they have a dancing, and just a terrific occasion. And all the local people, other non-Filipinos, would attend and participate or just be part of the whole festivity. And the Japanese had the bon dance. And so Kīlauea had its own bon dance too, back in the day in the 1920s. And so when I was a young man and my dad moved to Pahala, Hawaiian Ag Sugar Company. And Pahala, if you go Kīlauea isolated back then, Pahala was like at the end of the earth. Pahala is 25 miles from the volcano, 25 miles from South Point. Closest neighbor, Hutchison Sugar Company. And so when they have the bone dance, all the young Filipino boys would be dancing in there. And then you're all in line, dancing around this Yagura, the tower. And so it was like a big community event. Sports was big and it was promoted all the time. The other thing we had was the Hukilau. And I'm going to let you talk about Hukilau.
Well,
Without using the word well.
the Hukilau, because the mill had a lot of dirty water washing the cane, they had flume that would carry the water down to where we call Secret Beach now. And the dirty water would go in the ocean and you'd have clean water and dirty water. And right at the edge of the clean and dirty water, they'd have this, what they call moi. They got real big. And because they like hanging out in the dirty and clean water. And the other day I was talking to my wife about the Hukilaos. I says, try to remember, when was the last time there was a Hukilao in Kalihiwai Bay? She said, why you ask me that question? I said, because you were always against the dirty water in the ocean. I said, whenever the dirty water would go in the ocean, every summer we'd have at least 12, 15 Hukilaos. And whether you came first or you came when the fish was onshore, you got the same amount of fish. Even the children in their diapers, they got one fish. And it's because they were caring and sharing. And the Akanas were the major people that had the Hukilaos. And where there's the homes on the hill, excuse me, Mr. Akana, what was his name? Boy's father?
John.
John would be on the top of the hill and the guys on the bottom with the boat. And it was all manual powered with the oars. And he'd be on the top of the hill and he'd be yelling, go out, go out. Then he'd say, go Hanale. That means you turn and you go towards Hanale. Then he'd say, come in. Then he'd yell, hooky the lid, never mind the floater. And the people on the shore would be pulling in the fish, the nets for the fish to come in. And they'd get like tons of fish that came in. They'd catch sharks, they'd catch all the different types of fish. But we had, like I say, about 15 Hukilaos a year because of the dirty water. So I told my wife, hey, there's the pluses and the minuses of the dirty water. The fish, it attracts the fish. We'd have a lot of fish. And on the Filipinos, one fish was a meal for a week. That's lunch and dinner. They never, fillet the thing and stuff. They'd make soup. They'd have potato leaf and karamungay. And karamungay is the national tree of the Philippines. Every Filipino house had a karamungay tree, even to today.
And that's moringa. Yeah. Kalamungay, as they call it.
Anyway, the thing is, it's become so popular that, excuse my expression, even the Howleys now use it to cooking because it's a medicinal tree. The leaves are medicinal. So you can tell, you drive around Kīlauea and you can tell the Filipino houses because they have. My son has a big tree in the back and his wife Kalena uses it always in their food, every week in her salads, her cooking and stuff. It is, like I say, very good medicinal tree. I heard at one time, Honolulu the swap meet somebody brought, and within 10 minutes, 10 buckets of the karamungay was gone. And mostly it was the howlies that bought them.
Okay. Now, are you selling some of this stuff or?
No, I'm not selling
Okay.
that.
So we're gonna move on to the Hanalei Plantation, which he's a expert. He was a bellhop over there part-time. In 1961, they said this, our friendly rival, Hanalei Plantation. Hanalei Plantation was a real sugar company. It was up on this plateau here and down in the valley prior to. But this is the Hanalei Plantation Hotel that opened up in 1961. It would be the first big employer outside of Kīlauea Sugar Company that would change some of the dynamics of the community, whereby by the 60s, women were no longer hired to work on the plantation. They were all the jobs were filled by Filipino men. So there was no employment for them unless they went to Kapa'a and worked in the cannery, right by Pono Kai, where Pono Kai is. There was a huge cannery over there, pineapple cannery. And from Moloa'a all the way to, say, Kīlauea, just short of Kīlauea, all pineapple in the 60s, all pineapple. This would be the first big employer here. And so many of the housewives went to work for Hanalei Plantation. And it opened up a whole world for these people because up until that time, they had very minor, few opportunities for discourse with haole people other than the ones that grew up on the plantation and worked for the plantation. They didn't know any other types of people, haole people who came from all over the world and the level of sophistication or whatever. And so they were introduced via the Hanalei Plantation, which brought money for the family. And so they started buying nice cars, you know, nicer cars like Mustang Mach 1 and all this kind of stuff. So Mr. P, he had a Chevy Impala.
No, Chevy Chevelle.
Oh, Chevelle, you one step down there. But anyway, so you can talk about Hanalei Plantation, and it was run by Inter-Island Holidays.
Island Holidays.
Island Holidays, which ran Cocoa Palms, and eventually it was bought out by AmFac. So AmFac owned all this land here as well that we stand on. So they were one of the big companies. But Hanalei Plantation changed the dynamics of the community. Some for good, some for not so good, because wives started running away with other guys or whatever and seeing, hey, my husband, he's a real deadhead. We just sit at home, but this guy's got it going. Yeah.
Okay. Hanalei Plantation. I worked there, and basically that's where I met my wife. She went to Kamehameha School. She and Naomi Yokotake were classmates. And the Waioli Church used to come up to the hotel to entertain on Sunday evenings. Well, one thing led to the other. Naomi introduced, because Naomi's mom was the front desk clerk there. And Hanalei Plantation had a lot of celebrities that came there. Elvis Presley, and I remember distinctly one night, the manager, Barry Epp, says, you cannot go home until Liz Taylor arrives. I told him, Barry, I work for the plantation, 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. I cannot stay here all night. So, okay. So came like about little after 12, I hear this old Volkswagen bus, chuck, 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 chuck. One headlight, the windshield wiper going tick, 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 tick. Liz's brother owned Taylor Camp.
Howard Taylor.
He owned Taylor Camp, and she went to visit him while Richard checked into the hotel.
Richard Burton.
Yeah. So anyway, She comes in, drives in, and Barry Yap is, you know, by the desk and stuff. So I go there and I help her out of the car. She swings out with her bambula ring. And I'm there like, holy shit. So I grab her hand and she holds on to me and I touch the ring. And I says, am I going to get cursed because I'm touching her ring? So anyway, I help her out. She goes to the desk and my auntie Kaala was the manager, front desk manager. So she and Naomi's mom, Margie, Liz puts down her purse. She takes out a black box. I go in, what is that? So she opens it up and she has a fake ring. So she takes the real diamond ring, puts it in a box.
Bambula ring.
Huh?
I thought it was a bambula ring.
Yeah, the
okay.
bambula ring with, you know, bambula is big. Okay. And she takes out the real one, puts it in a box, puts the fake one on, and she tells my auntie, I want to see you put it in the safe. So she puts it in the safe and then she says, okay, I want you to lock it and try to open it. So my auntie locks it and then she says, okay, I trust you. But she has the fake one that, you know, the day-to-day use. The real one is in the safe. So I go to work the next day and I'm walking in like this. The guy says, what's wrong with your hand? Did you hurt it? I says, yeah, I touched the bambula real Liz Taylor's ring. He says, what? I says, yeah, I had to check her in last night and I touched her ring. I hope I don't get cursed because of that. So my boss tells me, that's not going to stop you from working. You got to go help me. Let's go.
What kind of tip did you get?
Nothing. You know, they were so
Okay.
high makamak that they never give us tips.
Okay. Maybe left a big tip at the thing. So divvy up amongst.
No, they never.
Oh, okay. So this is another Kīlauea beauty here, Carol Riola. And I was remiss. Every month they put the birthdays for everybody who worked on the plantation. They'll be all in there. So everybody will know everybody's birthday who worked on the plantation. So in a small community, that's, you know, I mean, that's why we were so close. And that's why we still have this bond with our fellow Kilaueans. But I'll tell you, the bond between, because almost all plantations were orchestrated and devised by the HSPA. Our realities for each plantation is very similar. And so we have a bond with it. Say some of family, they were working in Eva Plantation. Immediately, we have a bond, we have a topic of discussion because there was so much in common that each of these communities had. And so today, if you come across somebody said, oh, my father used to work for Eva Plantation and I grew up over there. And I said, oh yeah, I used to grow up at Kīlauea Sugar Company and I worked at Wailuku. And I worked at Hawaiian Ag and blah, blah, blah. Oh, you know, this so and so. And, you know, that's a very shared bond of friendship, instant acceptance. So this is a Rizal Day front cover over here. Birthdays, another Kīlauea beauty. This fellow here is Don Costello. He lived in that last rock stone house next to Oka Street. The turn into Oka Street. He lived on that corner there. He was a real character. His name was Felix Costello, and his nickname was Dong. And many of the Kīlauea men had nicknames. Okay, there.
Now, going back to the young beauties and stuff, what it is, hey, we used to check them out too. Anyway, what happened was the plantation doctor was Dr. Clyde Ishii. And he used to come in to the dispensary at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he'd drive in and then he'd walk in and Miss Hetrick was the nurse. And on the counter, there was a dishcloth, white dishcloth, and underneath was the needles that were duller than butter knives. Anyway, you walked in and she said, are you allergic to penicillin or terramycin? She said, you'd say, no. There, she pulled the thing, give you the injection. Then she'd say, what are you here for? I came for a physical. What didn't you tell me? Well, you just asked me if I was allergic. Then the thing is, Dr. Ishii would go, Helen, how come the mill is not working? She says, oh, they had 3 whistles this morning. So the plantation would blow a 5 o'clock whistle in the morning to wake up the people, okay? And then 7 o'clock was start work, 11 start lunch, 11:30 pow, 3:30 pow hana. 8 o'clock was, hey, kids, go to bed. It's 8 o'clock. Well, Dr. Ishii would say, hey, how come the mill is not working? She said, well, they had 3 whistles this morning. He went, oh no, 9 months from now, I'm going to be sleeping at Wilcox because the ladies are housewives, no work. What happens? The kids are at school, mama and daddy are home. 9 months later, the ladies are at Wilcox. So whenever there was a birthday party, you get like 5 or 6 kids celebrating, 1 or 2 days difference, their birthdays. Because if you go back 9 months, there was 3 whistles.
I learned something new right from him today. I didn't know that. I think my mind doesn't go there, but I guess his does. And it was only his topic was picked by speaking of young beauties. So Kīlauea School at graduation, front cover. This is that's Billy Pacheco right there. This is my mother handing out diplomas as the first lady of Kīlauea. And this is at the Kīlauea Slippery Slide. All the kids, this is when the Slippery Slide was there. All the kids would go there during the summertime. Umay kayon manang magan tayon. Come on, let's eat. So then the Kīlauea Filipino Club. So they had the Kīlauea Filipino Club. They had the Kīlauea Japanese Club. They had the Catholic Church as a Portuguese club, I guess, right? They didn't have the Portuguese club, but they had the Catholic Church. But anyway, so they also had credit union. Kīlauea had its own credit union. And so they'd have credit union meeting once a year, elect officers. And the Japanese early on had their own, I'm spacing on the word, but it's a savers club that independent Japanese, when they came here, they were denied credit at the regular banks. So they all kicked in monies and they formed this Kīlauea Savers Club. And it was managed, and I have all the ledgers. They're all in Japanese writing, kanji, all with all the savers' names, and only maybe, and they start up in 1913. So I have those records. And so they had their own savers club. And what the Filipinos would do, and a lot of times they would use that money, say they borrow that money, and one guy got a chance at borrowing the money 1 year, then the next one, and the next one, they'd alternate. And so they used that money maybe to pay for their child's. Back in the day, they couldn't go, there was no Kapa'a High School. They had to go to Kauai High School. And so they boarded in Kapa'a, in Kauai, and Lihue. And so a lot of these guys, they would live at somebody's house, like a plantation, a holiday family, and they would be like a yard boy or like a maid or something during off hours. And they would come home on the weekends. And so the family would pay money so that they could gas money, back to transportation, back and forth to school. They'd finance a car or something like that. And the Filipinos also did something like that. And they would collectively, like 3 or 4 bachelors would collectively buy a car and, okay, take it away. The compound. You know the word called. They would buy the car, all 4 of them, and they would drive around. And one driver, one guy had a license.
Only one guy, because whenever they had to sign any official document, and where they were supposed to sign, they'd grab the pen or the pencil and they'd go, and they put an X. They say, "You gotta sign your name." I don't know how to write my name. So the X represent my signature. So if you cross or you double cross you could get your loan or whatever just by marking the X. But the Filipinos were their cars were immaculate. You could eat off of the floor. It was so clean. So if it was muddy, you'd have to take off your shoes or your slippers and then go into the car. But shoes and slippers were very rare when we were growing up. You know, it was barefoot. So we could walk on the hila and not get poked. And a couple of years ago in Kīlauea, I might stray, but that's all right. They made a big scene about in the back of the Jacques Bakery, where they have that building in the back. That used to be the drain for the wastewater. And the herbicide plant was there. And they had this tank that this guy, Alberto Villanueva, he'd be sitting there and you get like 500 gallons and he'd be mixing the poison. Well, by sitting there, he'd fall asleep. And what would happen is the herbicide would overflow. And we'd be running around barefoot and we'd go, hey, get yellow water. So we'd be running in the herbicide with our bare foot, the yellow water. But you know what? I still get all my toes and my hands. You know, hey, it was medicinal.
Well, I think it only affected the brain.
What brain? But going back to Miss Hattrick, whatever you had, terramycin, penicillin. So the kids, they'd come walking in the door, and soon as they saw her, they'd scream because it was pull down your diaper and zap. The ocolis was all black and blue from the penicillin or terramycin that they'd get. But hey, that was the cope all for all the different sicknesses. But we didn't have lepto and all these $1 million things that we get now. Hey, we drank pasteurized water. We went in the herbicide. And hey, look, we're still going.
Yeah. But one of the things was the water was unchlorinated. And so, like every 2 years or so, we all in the community took typhoid shots. That was a mandatory thing that we did. And they did it for the kids at school. And so whether you were from Anini and you didn't work for the plantation, you lined up in the same line and they gave you the typhoid shot too. And so there was no like parental permission or anything like that. We just vaccinate you right there. And so this is my dad here in the manager's office, which is now a veterinarian building. And
the safe is still there. The plantation safe is still there and it's functional.
And another thing about Kīlauea, starting from the 1957, we had a slew of movies filmed in our area. So when I say Kīlauea, I mean all the land that the plantation controlled became known as Kīlauea, whether it was Waipake, Lepe'ule, even the Kalihiwai watershed, that be considered all the way to Molowa'a watershed and the valley, the western part of Molowa'a Valley that sinks down into Molowa'a, all called Kīlauea. We really didn't know much about Ahupuas and anything. Maybe some of the names came up, but Waipake never came up. We used Ko'olau. Lepe'ule never came up. We had Waiakalua because Waiakalua has a reservoir. And so we never knew much about how the Hawaiians divided up the land. And so everything was called Kīlauea. Even in the court cases where they're suing majors lawsuit for land in Kīlauea, none of it was in Kīlauea, yet the court case always referred to it as Kīlauea land.
Can I interject something?
Yes.
Okay, now where the now Kuhio Highway goes to where they call Molowa'a Road. There's that intersection. And where Zuckerberg has his security thing, that was the original Kukui Grove. There was a whole grove of kukui trees there. So they took our Kukui Grove and they transplanted the thing to Lihui Kukui Grove. But that's the original Kukui Grove that we know of. So they stole our name, which is not right. I'm
Well-
sorry I interrupted.
You know, we were sidetracked about names, nicknames. In Kīlauea, many of the employees had nicknames. So one of them was Takayuki Kimura. He was called Taxi. And we had Blackie Kimura. And then we had Don Costello. We had Pando. And we had
Socks.
Socks. And all these nicknames for people. And one poor fellow, and he stopped because he's talking about kukuis. The Kukui Grove used to be massive. It was the largest Kukui Grove in the entire island chain. And if you see the pictures of Reverend Alexander, there is a block print or a sketch of Reverend Alexander preaching to a Hawaiian congregation underneath the shade of kukui trees. It's a famous picture. It's done in about 1837 or so. And that Kukui Grove was called Kauhakake, I think it was called, that area. And it's in Pila and Waipake. And eventually the plantation took down most of those trees. In fact, by 1920 or so, most of those trees were down, and they used to have their 4th of July celebrations. And one year they had it at this Kukui Grove. And so the people sat under the shade of the Kukui Grove. But that was just the vestiges of it. And the Kukui Grove went across the street. So where that turnoff to Ko'olau Road, where the Zuckerberg turnoff is over there was Kukui there and Kukui across the street and back down towards Kīlauea. So the roadway was shaded with kukui trees. In about 1955 or so, they took another maybe 10 acres of Kukui Grove and took it out. And so there's only remnants left of that grove. But because kukui is edible, but it is, if you eat too much, it's a very powerful laxative. And so the nuts are tasty. If you roast them like macadamia nuts, they're tasty. And you can make like a chopped up. Hawaiians use kukui to make, it was called inamona. So when you make poke, you put sesame oil or olive oil. Hawaiians use inamona because it's high oil content, more than macadamia nuts. And they would roast it till, some would roast it till it's just black and a tar. Or some would just kind of roast it till it's brown and crispy. And they'd mix it in the poke. Their poke with limu, maybe limu kohu, or some other type of limu. I don't know. They call it ogo in Japanese. Manuea, I think it's called. But they would mix it with that. And so one of the workers, they were working in the 60s, they were working alongside this in Lepe'uli as you go down to Ko'olau Beach. He was working there in the fields, and his name was Marcelo. And so he saw one of his fellows eating this, when break time was coming out, eating a kukui. And he said, "What is that?" He said, "No, it's kukui nuts. You want to try one?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll try one." He said, "Oh, pretty good." So the other worker thought nothing of it, and he went off on his way. And then Marcelo went into the bushes and ate about 15 of them. And then about 2 hours later, every 15 minutes, he was running to the bushes to go to the bathroom. So his fellow worker nicknamed him Kukui. And that was his name over the entire plantation for the rest of his life. So that's how the nicknames were made up, yeah. And Mitsui, you know Helen Mitsui from Shared Blessings? Her husband was named Shizuto. And I don't know, Shizuto maybe sounds like chicken. So he was Chicken Mitsui, but he had a chicken neck and he had a real big Adam's apple that stuck out like that. So it's called Chicken Mitsui. Now, Kīlauea homemaker. And how are we doing on time? We're really going long, so I don't want to.
20 minutes.
Yeah. How much? What's that?
15, 20.
15 or 20 minutes. Okay, I can do that. This woman is named Isabella Kike Lum. Isabella is a first cousin to this. No, Auntie Mary is your auntie, right?
Right.
Is his first cousin. But Isabella, mother, Mary Pacheco, Freddie Pacheco's sister, his aunt. She has an amazing pedigree. She is one of the few people, and her offspring still live in Kīlauea in the form of the Lums. She used to, her mother married the grandson of Christian Kike. Christian Kike was one of the first Germans to come in when they brought Germans on the plantation. And he moved to Kahili and he married a Hawaiian woman. And he had a son. I think his name was Christian or something. And he had a son, a Christian. He married this daughter of a famous Mexican Paniolo who came to Kauai after going to the Big Island when the King Kamehameha III brought Mexican vaqueros to teach the Hawaiians how to wrangle cattle. And so this man, Miguel Castro, is left many descendants of which, if you know in Anahola, the Lovels, you see Castro Lovell, Miele Lovell, Miguel Lovell, they're all related to these people here and this guy, Miguel Castro. So she represents the Hawaiians here. She represents the first Portuguese here. She represents the first Germans, and she represents the first Spanish to come to Hawaii. And so her children, the Lums, which is a Ginny Lum, Cornell Lum, and
Albert.
Lum, I don't know how many are left already, but they represent one of the strongest pedigrees for being Keiki Oka'aina, children of the land, truly. And she was a character because from her mother, she learned the art of folk healing. So with folk healing, you take it away, Mr. Pacheco. Did you ever have any folk healing?
Oh, always.
Share it, please.
Okay, what it is, the Portuguese version is they call opohuli. Okay, what it is, especially the kids, because they jump around so much. And, you know, a lot of times the mothers would take the kid to the doctor, and Dr. Cockett in Kapa, he believed in Hawaiian medicine. And the mother would come, my baby is crying all this time here. He says, I cannot do nothing. She says, you're a doctor. What you mean you cannot do anything? And he said, you go find one of these Hawaiian or Portuguese ladies that does the opohuli. And she said, wait, you're the doctor. Why are you referring me? And he said, just do it. And he'd give them a couple names. So the mother would take the baby crying out the door and all pissed off with the doctor. So she went, found this lady, and the mother would come in, and my auntie would say, hey, this baby get upuhuli. So she take the baby and she start massaging the stomach. What it is the guts of the baby got turned because they were jumping so much. So she massaged the baby for 3 days and put a diaper to hold the stomach intact. And no sooner that she got through massaging the baby was comatose, sleeping. So after the whole episode, the mother would go back to Dr. Cockett and say, Doctor, now I believe you. He said, what do you mean? I left here condemning you that you couldn't take care of my baby. I went to the lady, not even 10 minutes after, my baby was sleeping and she slept right through and she's all okay now. It's because, like I say, the opohuli. Now, when I was working for the plantation, I'd be walking in front of my auntie's house, and she'd look at me because she'd be sitting on the porch. She goes, "Go home, take a shower, and shave." I went, "Yes, auntie." So I went home, and I'd shave my chest. And then I'd go, and she'd have this cup, and she'd put cotton and light it, and she'd put it on my chest, and the thing would suck my stomach out. And I was having problems with my stomach, but by doing that, she took the guts that was crooked and she'd make it straight. Then we'd put like the pink black back plaster over it, and you couldn't scratch it. You'd have to rub, and it'll stay on like for 5 days. Then eventually it'll peel off. But that was the cure all. And you know, I'd go, "Auntie, how do you know that I had opohuli?" I said, she's like about from here to the fence there. And she said, "I just saw your eyes. I knew by your eyes that you had opohuli." The other thing is, believe it if you want, I used to have what they call sun in the head. I didn't have a hat, and I used to be outside. And my wife didn't believe. So I'd have to go to my auntie's house at noon, maybe 5 to 10 minutes before noon. And she'd have this white towel, bath towel, and she'd have that same cup. And then she'd massage my head, say some prayers, and then put the cup with the water. And my wife said you could see the water bubbling. And after so long, she'd take it off. And if you hold up the towel, only where the cup was, there was the white, the imprint of the wet towel. The rest of the towel was all dry. And before you know it, I didn't have headaches. It took away all the headaches because somehow the sun was getting into me, and that was the remedy. And it's sad because the people that did it, like my aunties and stuff, they're no longer here. And the sad part, the children didn't want to learn. "Oh, I'm too busy." But now they look back and they go, "Why didn't I get forced to do it?" Because all the modern medicine, Tylenol and all this other stuff. But if you get the local things, hey, that's what it takes, you know, the natural products. Like I know if you get cancer, you can take soursep leaves, take it. I have proof that people that had cancer taking this as a tea has shrunk the cancer that they had. One is my niece, my nephew Don's wife. They were ready to cut her open. And when she went for her final check, the doctor said, "Something is wrong. I cannot find the cancer." And he said, why? And she said, "Well, my mother-in-law gave me this pomegranate leaves tea, and I've been taking it religiously, hot or cold, and it's done its thing." And she was cured of cancer. My cousin in the mainland, her cancer has shrunk because of taking this pomegranate, the soursep leaves. So there are some people that still have knowledge about the local medicinal trees or leaves and stuff that you can take to remedy the problems that you have. The first thing you got to do is you got to believe that it'll help you. If you don't believe, it won't. So believe when they tell you this might help you, and you got to believe, and 90%, 95%, it'll cure you.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the evening, dig down deep in your pockets, we will be selling Dr. Pacheco's magic elixir made with marungai leaves and soursop leaves and what else in there? Kombucha and everything else. And it's called Alternative Medicine for Those Who Fear Hypodermic Needles. So here's a picture. So other thing, because our minister, Reverend Hopkins, part Hawaiian, and this lady here is Julia Akana. She is, you know, the Akana, the Sprout girls, you know them? That's their grandmother. Yeah. This is for Christ Church in the book. And this here is the Moody family that came from Jamaica to work as the engineer in the mill. And so Mr. Moody was of African white descent from Jamaica. And he brought his sons here. And some of these boys excelled in, I think, football and volleyball football at the University of Hawaii. So they were raised in Kīlauea. And then we had weddings in the gym. And this is Auntie Mary over here, his aunt. She is the faith healer who taught Bella Lum her thing. And this is here, Mrs. Elizabeth Pa. She is the grandmother for all the Pa, like, what's his name? Chad Pa and
My daughter-in-law.
daughter-in-law. So if you stay here long enough, like Pacheco's related to everybody. And he also, how many times were you the best man at people's wedding? Here he is for a best man for the Woodward marriage. And this is my classmate, Darrell Woodward. And playing music, plantation employees. And this is Junior Dow singing with Harry Kamoku and Jane Gu from Anahola.
Who is that handsome guy on the left?
Right here, that's you, Gary Pacheco. Mr. P.
I think that was what attracted my wife.
Right? Possibly. Where is she? She's in the audience. Last time he said we had this thing, he made some kind of faux pas. I said, oh, this guy's going to go home and he's going to get it.
Well, see, that's why I didn't invite her today.
So
Because otherwise I'd go home and I'd be, why did you say this? Why did you say that?
fortunately, that one wasn't taped, but this one is. So you passed so far. So don't stick your foot in the mouth. But how many times were you the best man at people's weddings? You remember?
Well, I was in the wedding party for Jordan,
Yeah.
Kahananui, and Shirley, for Val and Sandy, for the Woodwards. Too many.
He's a popular guy, you know. He was real popular. Still is popular. Okay, and with that happy note, I think we're just about done. And so if you have any questions, just a few questions we can answer for you. And we're on Zoom too, so welcome to all the people. I forgot about you guys on Zoom, but thank you for listening in on Zoom. So my sister-in-law Gail and my brother Keith, my twin brother Keith, who wrote that book, Plantation Kids. If you haven't gotten that book yet, it's on sale for $20 at the Kauai Historical Society.
I won the last one. The last one that he did, you never get them to me.
Yeah, it's McBride Sugar Company.
Yeah,
as
the one with
well.
the smokestack.
And plus Uncle Gary's Magic Elixir that he'll be selling. So have we any questions? Yes, sir.
The railroad right away. I was told just recently that the railroad still has there is a right of way for the railroad to go from Mahui to North Shore, or is that not
Yeah.
right?
The railroad right away starts, I think, well, the bike path that goes from Kīlauea, that railroad system was connected all the way to, when you go to Anahola Beach and you see those piers out there, that was a pier, a shipping pier where Maki Sugar Company shipped their sugar out from. And the locomotive went from there all the way to Ahukini. And so that right away, because it went through government property or something like that. And then, so that became the right of way, which is today the walking path. But Kīlauea Sugar Company is interestingly enough, was never connected to other plantations. And so what made it a right of way is because it connected the whole system. And from the other side, they went to Port Allen. And so it connected the whole system of various plantations. And so that way they needed a right of way. Kīlauea has no railroad right of way because it was only for itself. And which brings into a short digression. Kīlauea and all the plantations, they provided electricity early on to all their employees and was powered from the mill. And so employees were given like 2 light bulbs and they paid 35 cents a month. And the management, they were given 4 light bulbs and a stove or whatever, and they paid $1 a month or something like that. And so, but plantations were hesitant to sell their power or to provide power beyond their own system, because if they did, they would be a public utility. And so for years, they avoided becoming a public utility. And so what happened was in 1955, Kīlauea Sugar Company had a massive storm, huge storm. And so they hooked up to the Kauai electric grid. And so they began, all the sugar companies began selling their excess power to Kauai Electric. And so that went on into the 70s and 80s when Lihue Plantation had their own power generating plant in Lihue, which they burned the gas, or they also burned biomass. And then they also had McBride Sugar Company, had Wainiha Power Plant, which went all the way over to McBride from Wainiha. And so the Wainiha Power Plant, hydro plant, the plantation power, and all the plantations became the originators of Kauai Electric. Yeah. So anyway, that's what we digress from that. But so the good thing about the railroad right away now is that because it has really improved what we know of Kapa'a to be today. For tourists and for just local people going, the access along the beach coast and the freedom to pass through there and jump on your bike. If it wasn't there, Kapa'a wouldn't be as what's the word for it, attractive as it is now. Yeah.
Excuse me, right where Aloha Roofing Supply is, that canal there, if you look the ocean side, there's a bridge there. That is the original railroad crossing, that the railroad went through there and through Kapa'a Town and went to where the bypass is. Because the Lihue Plantation took out the railway and they started hauling the sugar cane by trailers. So they took out the railroad. Kīlauea Beach, that was the central point where all the cane from Kīlauea and Mauka and everything, all the cane would come there in the cane cars. And there was 1 or 2 locomotives that would take the cane from Kīlauea and truck it to Lihue Mill. So that was the thing. And they had priority. They didn't have no guards or anything when they crossed the highway, like by the Wailua Bridge and stuff, where the Brian Baptiste Bridge is. Some of the foundation for that bridge is from the old railroad
Yeah.
thing.
That's why there were 2 bridges there side by side. Yeah.
The question for
Yes.
when the Kīlauea Sugar Plantation closed, where did all the workers
Okay, that's a good question. In 1969, they announced the closure. And so that meant that they had 2 years left because they would harvest the cane in 70 and 71. They had to harvest the 2 fields, the half of the fields that year, and then in 71. By 1971, they started to develop Princeville. But the interesting thing was that the plantation people were all expected to leave Kīlauea. And so the water department, county, never made a water plant for Kīlauea. In 1972, there was no water plant. They expected that the community would just dry up. People would go to other plantations or work for the county or go work for Princeville or the hotel, Hanalei Plantation. And the first question that people asked after they realized they were losing their jobs, they asked, can we buy our houses? Now, these are the shacks that I showed you now, yeah? Can we buy our houses? And the plantation said, oh, we got a problem here. You can't buy the house because they were all substandard housing. They had all outdoor toilets. They had very little plumbing in the house. And so they're also substandard, and they were too close together in the county standards. They said, well, no, you can't. So they, prior to that, in the 50s, they did a little housing study, and then they sold some land. And some people in Kīlauea actually bought land, about a handful of them, 7 or 8 people. One of them was her Uncle Eddie, thought way ahead in the future and bought a lot and built a house. And so he was one of the very few homeowners, along with Misa Tamura, Rosemarie, the Largusas, and the Mitsuis. The Mitsuis, they came to Kīlauea night after 1946 when they were wiped out from the tsunami in Kalihiwai. That's how they opened Mitsui store there. And anyway, I'm digressing. But the plantation said, got together with the union, they got together with the county authorities and said, okay, fellas, we got to make a subdivision for our employees. They don't want to leave. They want to stay here. So with that, they got to work at the various places along Princeville was just starting, Plantation House, some of the hotels, and some of the men actually commuted to Olokele Sugar Company from Kīlauea. And so the Filipino men, the irrigators, they would go. I think your dad did that. And so they would go, that's Francisco Peru Senior, that they would all pull together, drive to Olokele, and stay there from Monday to Friday. And Friday, they would drive home, visit their family. And then on Sunday night or Monday morning, they would head to Olokele and work for Olokele. They worked for Olokele because Olokele was a sea brewer plantation, just like Kīlauea was. So that's what the people did. And yes, sir, Mr. Chase. Where did the water come from? From the original water? Yeah, the original water, he's asking where the water came from originally. The water came from what is called the Pohaku Hono stream, which is above Kalihiwai Reservoir. And it's taken from a diversion dam on that stream and ditched to a cistern, which is the cistern is still there, I believe. It's a concrete cistern, and it ran through a series of screens, 4 or 5 graded screens down to a fine mesh, from a large mesh to a fine mesh. And the ditchman for the plantation would go up there daily and clean the screens, and in that way, try to keep as much of the macro organisms out. The microorganisms all got in because it was an open tank sitting there, and then unchlorinated, and then it went through a pipe all the way, and for a long time it was just a redwood pipe. You know, they get the staves and they would steel a redwood pipe that passed through common ground. So after Hurricane Eva, that pipe was still running. And so that's where we got our water from during Hurricane Eva. We go up there and fill up at this standpipe from that cistern. Yeah, that's the pasteurized water. A story, and Pacheco sticking to it. But it's a true story, though. It comes from a former plantation manager, but he didn't say pasteurized. He said, our water is doubly pasteurized. And when the other plantation manager said, what? Doubly pasteurized? And he kind of scoffed at him. He said, yeah, it runs through 2 pastures. Any other questions? Where was the mill? Okay, good question. The mill was right across Konglung store, where Konglung store is today. If you look Mauka to the mountains, the mill would be right across the street. And so the reality for us, and even prior to that, was anyone going to Konglung store would have to run the gauntlet. They'd have to cross a whole bunch of train tracks. Then they would have to dodge mud puddles and mud. Then they would have to cross a road and then step into Konglung store, which was always dusty. And we knew it because we went barefoot all the time. And so when you walk on concrete with dust, it doesn't feel good on your feet. It feels really irritating, like you feel weird. But that's how the store was. And they tried their level best to keep it clean, but there was no way because it either was dusty or muddy. What's that?
What did they sell?
Oh, what did they sell at Konglong? They sold everything from reef walker tabbies to shotgun shells and everything in between. Medicine, canned goods, fishing poles, meat, rice, kerosene, whole bunch of stuff. And so when Chow Long went out of business, when he closed down after he sold to Tim King, who developed this Kong Lung fancy boutique, Chow Lung had a sale. And so when we went in there, we were just flabbergasted because he had these huge chicken feeders made out of galvanized metal. He had all these mining picks, like the pickaxes, but they weren't your conventional pickaxe. They had a small blade on the top and a very sharp point on the other side. And he had a whole bunch of those. And those are left over from the days when they dug tunnels. And I bought one. I don't even know where it is today, but yeah. It was an excellent pick to peel coconuts. Yeah. Any other questions? Any Zumba guys out there? Okay. Oh, with that happy note, Mr. Pacheco, I'll give you the final word.
Well,
Not well.
I'm not digging it. One of the things that Gary said about this being a cattle ranch, when there was the pineapple cannery where Ponokai is, that was called the Down Cannery. And 1 year where Church of the Pacific is, all the way to the road going down to Wanini, that was all pineapple.
That's right.
There was all pineapple field. And the pineapple would be about so big. And it was so sugar sweet because, hey, it was pasture. And now they're growing pineapple. And whenever the pineapple went from Hanalei to the cannery, the girls that were trimming the eyes off of the pineapple, they'd all go, I got to go to the bathroom because the pineapple was so big. Normally, you can just poke your finger in it and then trim. But because the thing was so big, they couldn't because it was, too hard to maneuver. So a lot of them had to go to the bathroom because they didn't want to trim the pineapple from Hanalei. But it was really, it was a lot of fun working
My mind
there.
was going someplace else. Pasteurized pineapple.
Yeah. So it's good to talk about the good old times and bringing back memories of growing up, as we call it, the Hanabata days, and Gary's brother, his older brother, Bobby, we used to call him Bebop. And his sister, Judy, was my classmate. But Bobby didn't act like the manager's son. He was the racketeer. He used to take his mother's Buick, and there was an airfield above Pukaele, above Kīlauea, and then in the evenings we'd go up there and drag race, and he'd take his mother's Buick and drag race with like Jordan Kahananui and myself. And before we went back, he says, "Hey, Micho, let's go to your house. We gotta wash my mom's car. I don't want the dust from the airfield." And she knows that I was using it to race. But hey, what she didn't know didn't hurt. And like I said, even though they were the manager's children, they were treated like local boys, and they enjoyed it. That's why he is such a prosperous business owner, and he's my friend.
Oh, mahalo. My friend, yes. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for the opportunity. Don't forget Gary's elixir now.